Welcome, everyone. This is Denny and Carl with Get Wisdom, and today we're going to continue with our channeling series. And today, the channeling subject is Rasputin. And Rasputin was an infamous figure from early history of Russia around the turn of the century, and involved with the fall of the Tsarist monarchy in 1917. So we had done an earlier channeling with this about this fellow through his associate Alexandra, who was the wife of Tsar Nicholas II, and Rasputin was intimately involved with her because of his ability to heal their son Alexei, who was a hemophiliac. So some of you who have seen that channeling that Carl and I did some time ago will be pretty familiar with the story. So I have some things to read about this, but first I just want to thank everybody for joining us, and I'd like Carl to introduce us to this topic a little bit, and then we'll have a little bit of discussion, and we'll get started. So thank you, Carl.
Thanks, Denny. Thanks to all of you who are watching. It's interesting, as we do this series, talking with people from the past who have been in the living and left their mark in one way or another, for better or worse. Sometimes it's a mixed story. Many times it's an unappreciated story or a misunderstood and incorrect accounting of something that's happened in history. And it's not surprising, because we know that reality is not what it seems to be on the surface. This world is stranger than people give it credit for. And there is always a deeper layer of cause and effect going on to manipulate things and to involve interlopers who really have a stranglehold on us and have for a long, long, long time. This has been going on many thousands of years. And the bottom line is they play games with us. They manipulate the individual people, and through that can control nation states and what they do, whether it's war or some kind of conflict over territory, or the way the financial transactions are taking place with taxes and tariffs and all those sort of things that are points of friction. And in general, mess things up for us and can get us divided into warring factions. And this happens on an interpersonal level, within groups of people, including family groups, and then on up through the structure of society and communities and nation states and globally. And it's very bizarre. It's very strange. But we're a virtual reality for extraterrestrials. They're in a dark alliance. They run things from behind the scenes. They have a bloodline who are in positions of power and wealth, and they make the government leaders jump to their tune and impose their will on things directly and indirectly through the financial system and so on. This sounds like a wild, paranoid delusion, I grant you. I would never have believed this 10 years ago, but I've come to accept it because the evidence, as I probe into things, keeps mounting and keeps adding up, and every new increment adds a piece of the puzzle.
And can I add something, like, just in the process of discovery here, and correct me if I'm wrong, Carl, but my understanding of the progression of this was that in your healing work that you were doing with your clients, this ET thing kept cropping up. And at one point you did a survey and you found out that about 5% of your clients had some kind of alien interference, direct interference, that was causing problems in their life. So that was the reason that you started to explore this subject.
Yes. Well, this is something I've known as far back as I can remember. You know, I was always an avid reader, and my mother arranged for me to get permission from the library for me to use the adult section. You know, of course, in In my era, there were no adult books really. It was just that kids weren't ready for
Right.
more sophisticated things. So
Catcher in the
they make
Rye.
messes, so keep them out. Segregate them. But anyway, I started reading books from the 50s that started talking about this. I remember Donald Kehoe, this
Right.
military officer who wrote this book, Flying Saucers Are Real.
Right.
And I was captivated by it. I was just enthralled and entranced. Now I know that was also the divine realm kind of egging me on, cheering me on. Yeah, yeah, look into this. Look at that. Isn't that amazing? Wow, what if that is real? This is good to keep in mind, isn't it? This is how they kind of help to guide us, not
Right.
through telling us what to do or controlling, but making offerings and patting us on the back, giving us little nudges and encouragements. But anyway, all my life, I've had my ear to the ground with regard to that subject.
Right.
And I finally saw one back when I was in I think my 30s. Unmistakable. It was one of those blowout experiences, never expected it would happen. And then I really knew. It wasn't just kind of an intriguing idea,
Right.
but I really knew. There's nothing like experiencing something yourself. And you're never the same after because now you're an insider, you're an experiencer,
Right.
you know it's real. So there have been a variety of things like that that have happened. And in working with people, I've had clients come to me who have recollections of encounters with aliens. And of course, the first instinct one has is, well, there must be something unbalanced about this person. But it did not ever prove to be the case. There were people that impressed me as being grounded and very cautious in their interpretations of things. Many of them didn't want to believe it. They wanted me to help them find some other explanation for what had happened.
Right.
That's not the earmark of somebody who's trying to make a hoax happen or draw attention to themselves. These people don't want attention. They're just troubled by what's happened.
Right.
And there's no one you can go to and talk about this.
Right.
And I found that out when I had my UFO experience that no matter who I would mention it to, no one ever followed up. No one ever expressed any interest.
Right.
I don't think I persuaded anyone that flying saucers are real just because I say I saw one.
Yep.
And that I know is a deeper problem, that people are being suppressed with mind control to make them complacent. So these interlopers are using us as gaming figures, just like a video game where you have avatars and you're controlling some superhero or something and there's some agenda.
Yeah.
Well, they use real people in this way by
Right.
manipulating their minds and so on. So the people in history are essentially pieces on a game board that were maneuvered and positioned in certain ways and made to interact with certain people with a certain agenda. And talking with them when they're back in the light, they know this full well because they have that panorama. They look back, they can see the past with clarity and precision, and they see all that's going on here on the earth. And they'll talk about this. It's quite amazing. It's a mind-blowing thing to realize. This is going on right under our noses.
Right. And one of the things that's, I think, unique about him is that he is among a handful of channeling subjects that we've had where we have been told through another channeling subject that this fellow has been misidentified in large measure. Alexander came right out and said it. What has been told about this guy is not the truth. There's a different story to be told about who he was, what he was doing, what he was up to. He was by no means a pristine figure. I mean, we did the same thing we do the same thing with Mother Teresa. We might be a good channeling subject as well, because it's like people are all either all good or they're all bad. We have this tendency to want to put them into these camps that are very unrealistic, and the light beings uniformly recognize that that's not how the human experience is. It's a mixture of corruption and divine inspiration. And if there's enough corruption there, then that's the camp you get put into. Everything you did was bad. Everything that you did was for evil purposes. Thus, da 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 da. That was mentioned to Karl earlier. We have the Russians could comprise about 1/6 of the Earth's population, and some percentage of those people could, from their perspective, and probably from our perspective too, rightly think that Rasputin himself was an integral player in the fall of the monarchy and assisted in his way for the rise of the Bolsheviks, and thus for many Russians literally losing their country for 70 years in a tragic series of events. The two wars, the revolution, then two wars, the Stalinist purges. We're talking about 70 million people being killed through the actions of their own government. Some huge percentage of that number, it escapes me right now, but I think the estimates are somewhere around 30 million, not war-related deaths, just outright killing of their own people by the own government. So this fellow was a player in that evolution. So I think he's an important figure in that regard for someone we could pay attention to, especially given the fact that he was so egregiously misidentified in terms of who he was and what he did. Yeah. So it's going to be interesting. It's a mixed bag for sure. I'm sure some of the accounts of him that you could read in the biographies and stuff are true. But in the context of that, the healing work that was also documented, people didn't really know where to put that.
Well, they dismissed it, I think, largely.
They just said, well, we really can't explain that, so we got nothing to say about it. In terms of how that applied to his character.
Well, he was a spiritual person, and he was a healer. And of course, in today's world, that's not accepted as a reality that it can happen. So there had to be some other explanation. He was hoodwinking those people. Mm-hmm. He was giving them false hope and maybe doing a little bit of encouraging positive thinking that might have had a placebo effect. And this is what science views this sort of thing in.
Right.
It can never be an act of God that someone is connected spiritually enough to be effective in helping facilitate a healing. There's no place for that on our current mainstream perspective. So the guy had to be either self-deluded or an out charlatan.
Right.
And this is true of all the light workers. They end up being attacked. They end up being maligned through distortion and smear tactics. And also, they're manipulated also by the darkness. And that can be partly effective, if not totally in the end. It takes many of them down in the final stages of things, because if they really work at it, they can get to anybody, literally. And one of the favorite tactics, and I think it might apply to this guy, they create lures of various kinds, whatever might appeal to that individual, whether it's trappings of luxury or wealth or sexual encounters and opportunities. And they will lure them into liaisons and philandering, whatever might actually technically be going on, in order to discredit them. And if you think about all the powerful figures in our time who have had scandals revealed about them, that is almost always the case, that they were lured into it.
Yeah.
And they manipulated the females to position themselves and present themselves in such a way. Sometimes there's a third party who does an introduction, and it's all orchestrated. to create someone to fall from grace
Yeah.
or bend the rules and or break them, and then it compromises them, and sometimes it's used for out and out blackmail, but it always is devastating to reputations. And you think about any of the big humanitarian figures, there's almost always some taint. This is
Yeah.
kind of classic that no
Yeah.
matter who it is, Martin Luther King, there were those FBI tapes of
Yeah.
his liaisons with
Right.
women on the road while he was traveling, his wife never knew about,
Yeah.
etc. And Jack Kennedy, he had girlfriends and things. And we know that a lot of that was orchestrated, his affair with Marilyn Monroe, for example. So,
Right.
so we'll see with Rasputin. Maybe
Yeah.
this will come up. I don't know, but
Yeah. Well,
I know he was maligned in this way in his own time.
yes. Yeah. Even after there was another round of biographies that came out after Perestroika, and some additional records became available about firsthand testimony and stuff. Even with that, a lot of it wasn't positive. But it always goes back to what is survived, who said what, and what got recorded. That's a manipulation as well. For posterity's
Always.
sake. Yeah. So we did do a channeling with Alexandra, who's the wife of Tsar Nicholas II, and we asked her, "What can you tell us about the source of Rasputin's influence and his relationship to you and Alexei?" Alexei was the young son with hemophilia. How dark spirits and/or alien beings were involved. And I'm going to read just some outtakes. It's full. This transcript is fully a page and a half long. We don't have time to read the whole thing, but I'm going to read part of it just to set the stage for this channeling, so people know to what extent the difference between the popular conceptions of this fellow and what we heard from a light being. This is a most interesting situation and will be a surprise to many. This hold over others, seemingly through a kind of magnetic personality, perhaps reinforced by witchcraft, some manifestation of the dark arts, to gain such trust in the highest levels of the ruling class and seemingly be protected, kept under their wing almost as a kind of evil genius, doing it through some kind of mind control, has been a popular notion entertained again and again and again by historical figures. This is perhaps an even more difficult scenario to embrace for today's world, and today's audience hearing these words, than the fantastic scheming we just described. Rasputin, in actuality, was in a divine alignment, was a highly spiritual person and a true believer in the divine. As a practical matter, being pragmatic, seeing the world as it was, he made an accommodation to the place he found himself and, in essence, made a deal with the devil, so to speak, by befriending the powerful because it kept him safe and it came with great rewards as well. So I'm going to skip ahead. Rasputin was blessed with an abundance of intuitive power. That was his strength. That was his calling card. He did not fully understand all of the dimensions of this himself, but he had an uncanny lack for knowing things. Skipping ahead again. In his day, he served himself, but not himself alone, and his genuine concern for others enabled him to entrain divine assistance through his ardent prayer requests on their behalf, even though it might, in particular circumstances, be seen as quite self-serving because he would be credited with the result as much as the divine. It is not out of alignment to reap reward personally for doing divine work. Okay, skipping ahead again. His personal conduct can be viewed in many ways, and we do not judge, so we will not wade in here with any further cast to aspersions. My comment, of which there are many if you read about this fellow. Okay, skipping ahead, we'll conclude with, so the relationship of Rasputin to the royal family was a genuine kind of symbiosis. His attraction to the finer things of life. Despite being a humble person, he was enamored and dazzled by the powerful, but he also had a divine role to play, and he did many things to allow healing for those troubled beings. That is no small service. It will be unheralded, and it will be misunderstood. But as you've heard many times, it is the predators among you who need the help of the divine the most. He was serving in that capacity, pure and simple. So that was from the channeling that Karl did with Alexandra a few months ago when we asked about this. So we got quite a response. It's over a page and a half, but those are kind of like the highlights I wanted to pull out. as kind of to set the stage for the 6 questions that we'll have for him today.
Okay, well, this hopefully will be interesting, and we'll flesh out the story a bit more.
Okay.
It's interesting that light workers have been doing this all through history, not to segregate themselves and not consider the suppressors, the ones who subjugate humanity, but to do some kind of healing for them. And that's what strikes me the most about Rasputin, that he was in this nest of evil, truly. If you read her channeling, you'll read all about it, who these beings truly were.
Right.
The Tsar and the family, they were not human. They were reptilian replacements. So this is as bizarre as it gets.
Yeah.
And that's yet another way humans get manipulated. Sometimes imposters will replace them and take over in their stead. And that gives them hands-on control, the reins of power, or whatever the person's role is. So Rasputin comes along as this light worker and inserts himself right in the middle, right in the eye of the storm, in a sense.
Yeah.
And that doesn't happen by accident. It really doesn't.
Right.
That's a divinely guided implementation of the desire for this person to do good and to serve God in some way. And he did. So we're in our own way doing a similar thing with our Lightworker healing protocol. And a big part of our charter is to heal the interlopers.
Yeah.
To heal those in power, because that is the hope of humanity alone. We have to heal them so they will leave us alone finally. If we don't, if we only think about people, it leaves these interlopers in charge of things, and that's not going to end well.
Right.
So every bit helps, and he was paving the way in as best he could with his life, I think. So,
yeah. Well, I'm looking forward to his perspective on this. I mean, we kind of scratched the surface here with the other channeling, but we're going to get a little bit deeper in this. The whole reptilian aspect was something that we weren't sure about. We had our speculations when we did the channeling with Alexandra, but this raises up a whole nother crop of questions: is how does a light being actually function? What is what are the goals, problems, conditions under that scenario? And so we have a question here that addresses that aspect of it too, which it's probably had me scratching my head a little bit when this started to become known. So just one other little story that I want to relate before we start. In one of the more popular healing sessions that was documented, the royal family was far away. He was back, I think, near his hometown, which apparently wasn't too far away from where they were. The royal family was eventually killed by the Bolsheviks. But Alexei had fallen from a horse. He was a hemophiliac and he had internal bleeding. So he was in a bad state, in a bad way. And by then, there was already a partnership forming between the Tsar's family and Rasputin. And so Alexandra was beside herself. The doctors couldn't help. So she sent a telegram to Rasputin, and he replied and said that not to worry, everything's going to be okay. Keep the doctors from bothering him. And the next day, he was basically back to normal. The bleeding had stopped. He was back to his self again, pretty much healed. And so this is one of the this is supposedly the healing episode that really cemented the relationship between Alexandria and Rasputin. So, and he was the heir to the throne, so there's a lot of pressure on the family to make good on his survival.
Yeah.
Okay, so with that, maybe we should go ahead and get started.
All right, very good. I'll just take a moment to get in the state of consciousness I need and put safety around the work. Very critical for any channeling to ask for divine protection for the process because otherwise you're going to get an imposter. They're scanning the skies, looking for intuitives at work, and wanting to disrupt, to co-opt, mislead, misguide, and sideline channelers into a dialogue with an extraterrestrial psychic who will forever do hand-holding of them and keep them complacent and mollified with some warmed over spiritual principles or whatever is needed, and never really help them do profound things, just kind of feel good messages of encouragement and upliftment and so on. You know, we need those things, but not if they're inauthentic and not if they're substituting for real progress in understanding the problems of the world and how to fix them. You know, wanting things to be good is all fine, but it doesn't solve the problems. It just focuses you on what you want to see, but it will not bring it about, contrary to New Age beliefs. Change happens through action. There has to be an action step, and that's the piece that's missing in all of the feel-good advice and so on. And without ever clarification of who's doing what to whom, you won't hear this kind of story from other people by and large. It's very rare. And that's deliberate because we're being kept in the dark and by our own authorities as well. And there's a huge collaboration between the US government and the extraterrestrials with a space program. And you won't read about it in the news because it's a secret. We're told they'll come out of the closet one day, and that won't be a good thing because it will give us false promises and make people believe in them, and it's duping us. But we're not quite there yet. So in the meantime, let's see what we can add to the mosaic. So I'll go ahead and get started.
Okay.
This is Rasputin.
Thank you for joining us. Did you make it to the light upon your death? And was your death caused by the gunshot wound to your head? Was there poison in the wine and or the cake? And given your skills in prophecy, was there any forewarning about this event?